What if the balding, one-eyed teddy bear in the back of your wardrobe, the one you kept for sentiment and would be embarrassed to put on a shelf, is worth more than the wardrobe he is sitting in? 10 of these worn-out bears have sold for hundreds, several for thousands, and one of them carries the most famous name in the business while being worth almost nothing in the wrong decade. Let's find out whether he is in your house right now. Here is the truth almost nobody tells you. Condition matters far less with bears than it does with anything else you own. A doll with a scuffed face loses most of her value. A bear that has been loved bald, patched at the paw, and restuffed twice can still bring serious money because collectors of this one thing have decided that wear is evidence rather than damage. What actually decides the number is the maker, the way he was built, and whether anything survived that proves who made him. And nobody ever taught you to look for that. You were taught to look at his face, which is the one part that tells you nothing. Now, let me be honest with you, the way somebody who buys whole houses has to be. Your bear is almost certainly not the Steiff dressed in Louis Vuitton that sold in Monaco in the year 2000 for $2.1 million. That was a one-off collaboration bought by a collector for a museum, and there is no version of your childhood bear that becomes that. I am not going to pretend otherwise, but the distance between a $10 bear and a $1,500 bear is a great deal shorter than people think, and almost all of it is settled in two places you can check tonight without leaving the house. Number 10. The Talking Bear from 1985. An animatronic bear with a cassette deck in his back and eyes and a mouth that move while he reads a story. If you have one, he is probably in a loft, silent, with the tape door hanging open. Here is the honest picture, and I will not dress it up. He was made in enormous numbers, and a great many survive, so the ordinary ones change hands for very little indeed, sometimes under $10, even in the original packaging. But a working first edition with the books and the cassettes together generally sits around $200 to $300, and the ones still sealed in the box go well beyond that. Here is your test tonight. Put a fresh set of batteries in him and see whether the motor still turns. Then check whether you still have the books and the tapes, because that trio together is worth several times the bear alone. And the loss I see most often? The bear gets kept for the memory, and the cardboard box with the books goes out with the recycling, which is the reverse of what the market wants. Number 9. American Bears from the middle of the century. A soft, rounded, unjointed bear with a synthetic coat and a printed label in the side seam. He does not have the stiff, formal look of the older European ones, and your first thought is probably that he is just a stuffed toy. That instinct is broadly right, and I would rather tell you that than sell you a fantasy. American makers like Gund and Knickerbocker turned these out by the million from the 1940s onward, and the everyday ones sit in the tens of dollars. The exceptions are the early ones, the character licenses, and anything that still carries its original swing tag. Here is your test tonight. Squeeze the limbs where they meet the body. If the arms and legs rotate independently with a disc joint inside, he is older and better made than he looks. If they are simply sewn in place, he is a later soft toy, and you should enjoy him rather than insure him. Number 8. The English Bear with the Printed Foot. A golden mohair bear with a label stitched flat onto the underside of one foot rather than into a seam. British households had these by the hundreds of thousands, from the 20s through the 60s. Chad Valley was one of the great English toy houses, and it held a royal warrant, which is printed on many of the labels. A 1950s example by a recognized English maker in good condition, with the label still readable, commonly falls somewhere between roughly 80 and 400 euros, and the better ones climb past that. Here is your test tonight. Turn him over and look at the sole of each foot. The label is stitched onto the fabric rather than hanging from a seam, and on the older ones it will say, Made in England. A label that has been washed to a blank rectangle costs you real money, so resist the urge to clean anything. The loss I see most often here is somebody cutting the scratchy label out decades ago so a child would stop complaining about it. That small kindness removed most of the value. Number 7. The bear with the pinched, upturned nose. Another English maker, and this one is identified by shape rather than by any label, which is useful because the labels are usually long gone. Chiltern bears from the 30s through the 50s have a distinctive look, with a rounded head, a shaved muzzle, and short bristle plush on the snout, and often heavy velvet pads rather than felt. They sit in the same broad band as the other English makers of the period, which is to say from about €80 to $400 for a good one, with better and larger examples going further. Here is your test tonight. Run a thumb across the muzzle. A shaved snout in a shorter, denser pile than the rest of the coat is a construction choice, not wear, and it is one of the most reliable ways to spot this maker with no label at all. Number 6. The bear with the celluloid label on his foot. Merrythought is still going, which is rare in this trade, and it has been making bears in Shropshire since 1930. The early ones carry a small metal or celluloid button and a distinctive stitched label. The everyday vintage ones commonly run between 250 and 500 pounds, depending on size and rarity, which is already a serious number for something sitting in a loft, and the exceptional ones go a great deal higher. One prized example named Titan reached 2,000 pounds. Here is your test tonight. Look for a label on the foot with the maker's name written in a flowing script, and check the ear for the remains of a small button. Then look at the paw pads. Original pads that have worn through to the stuffing are honestly better for value than pads somebody has neatly recovered in new felt. Number 5. The English bear that gave the world a very famous fictional one. J.K. Farnell of London made high-quality mohair bears from before the First World War, and one bought at Harrods in 1921 became the bear that a boy called Christopher Robin owned and that his father wrote about. That connection makes the maker permanently interesting to collectors. A named Farnell example called Jasper sold for 1,500 pounds, and good ordinary examples of the period sit well into the hundreds. Here is your test tonight. Farnell bears of the early period have a characteristically long, narrow muzzle and webbed claw stitching across the paws, often 5 stitches rather than 4. The webbing is the tell, and it survives even when every label is gone. Before we get to the top 5, there is something worth stopping on because it explains this whole list. The bears that turn out to be worth real money almost never look valuable. They look thin, faded, and repaired. The plump, bright, symmetrical bear in the display cabinet, bought new as a collectible, is the one worth roughly what it cost, because a bear made to be collected was never scarce. What actually decides the number is a short list of physical signals: the hump on the back, the length of the arms, whether the eyes are glass or plastic, whether the joints turn. Those are all readable in about a minute. And that is why I put together a small guide called Reading the Marks, where I go through the maker labels and the construction tells that separate a $20 bear from a $2,000 one. So you can read a piece before somebody across the table reads it for you. It is linked below if you want it. And that is the last you will hear of it. Now, back to the list. Number 4. And this one is not a maker at all. It is the shape of his body. Before you find a single label, the construction dates a bear within about a decade, and you can read all of it with your hands. Look for 4 things. A pronounced hump at the top of the back, which the early bears have and later ones lost. Arms that reach down past the hip, sometimes almost to the knee, with a curve at the wrist. A long snout rather than a flat face, and boot button or glass eyes on a wire shank, rather than molded plastic ones on a plastic post. Here is your test tonight. Feel along his spine for the hump. Then, lay his arm flat against his side and see where the paw lands. Hump plus long curved arms plus glass eyes puts him before about 1930, whatever the label says or does not say. A flat back, short arms, and plastic eyes puts him after the war. The loss I see most often is somebody assuming an old-looking bear with no label is worthless. The body is the label. It simply has to be read with your hands rather than your eyes. Number 3. The earliest American bears. The teddy bear is named after an American president, and the American side of the story starts in Brooklyn at almost exactly the same moment as the German one. The Ideal Novelty and Toy Company built the first American bears in the early 1900s, and genuine examples are extremely scarce because they were toys, and toys were destroyed. An authenticated early American bear of this period is a 5-figure object in the right condition, and even damaged ones are serious money to the right buyer. Here is your test tonight. These have no button, no label, and never did, which is exactly why so many go unrecognized. Look instead for shoe button eyes, which are small, black, and slightly domed, on wire shanks pushed through the head. Then look at the feet, which are narrow and pointed rather than round. If you think you have one, stop handling it and get it in front of a specialist auction house rather than a general one. Number 2. The label, the tag, and the box. This is the one that quietly costs people more than every other mistake combined, and it has nothing to do with the bear himself. A bear with his original swing tag still attached at the chest can be worth several times the identical bear without it. A bear with the box he came in is in another category again. Collectors are buying proof as much as plush, and the paper is the proof. Here is your test tonight. Check the chest, the ear, both feet, and every seam for anything paper, card, or metal, however faded. Then check the loft for the box, because people keep boxes far more often than they remember. And the loss I see most often, without any question, is the tag. Somebody snipped it off in 1962 so it would not scratch a baby, and half the value went into a kitchen bin 60 years ago. Number 1, and it is almost certainly a name you already know, because it is the most famous name in the business, Steiff. Here is the part that surprises people. A great many Steiff bears are worth modest money. The company has been producing continuously for over a century in enormous quantities, and a standard bear from the 1960s or 70s in ordinary condition is a pleasant thing worth a pleasant amount. Fame is not value. The most recognized name is rarely the valuable object, because the whole world already has one. But here's the turn this entire video has been walking toward, and it is the same lesson as every item tonight. Steiff dates itself, precisely in the ear, and almost nobody reads it. The metal button has been in the ear since 1904. The earliest, from about 1904 to 1905, is larger and carries a little elephant rather than a name. From about 1906 through the middle 1920s, it is smaller and reads Steiff, with the final letter trailing backward underneath the word. And the tag beside the button is a calendar of its own. White or linen from about 1905 to 1926, red from 1926, and yellow from 1934 right through to the early 1980s. And there is one more thing worth knowing. During the Second World War, the buttons stop because the metal was needed elsewhere, so a genuine bear from those years may carry nothing at all. So here's your final test, and it is the smallest detail on this list. Take him to a bright window, fold the ear forward, and look at the button and the color of the tag behind it. A white tag and an elephant is a different universe from a yellow tag, and the difference between them is measured in thousands. The mourning bears Steiff made in black in 1912 after the Titanic went down are the clearest example of what that scarcity does. One of those sold in the year 2000 for $136,000. Every single item tonight came down to the same habit. Not the face, not how clean he is, not how much you loved him. The maker, the way he was built, and whatever scrap of paper or metal survived to prove it. So before you clear out a single box or let anybody talk you into a lot price for the whole loft, do this first. Turn him over, read the label, and believe what it tells you. If this made you want to go straight up to the loft and start folding bear ears forward, do me one small favor and like the video, because that is what tells me to keep making them. And the next one lives behind the subscribe button, which is this exact treatment for the toys from the 60s and 70s sitting in those same boxes. Then tell me down in the comments, what is the oldest bear in your house, and who did he belong to first? A parent? A grandparent? A house you helped clear out? I read all of them, and the story of who carried him is half of what he is. One last thing, and I do mean it. Do not sell a single bear before you have looked inside both ears. Number 1 is probably in your loft right now. Go and find him.